moment. So another story in the NBA. There was a report yesterday, some rumblings about the Golden State Warriors potentially offering their third-year guard, Jordan Poole, a deal this offseason, a contract that would be worth 4 years, $80 million. It was floated out by the San Francisco Chronicle. And it's funny because at first glance, when I took a look at the headline, I think everyone probably had the same thought process. Jordan Poole, really? $20 million? But then I took a step back and I further dissected it. And I actually think that this is a worthy contract for a guy in Jordan Poole. And I'll tell you why. First of all, Jordan Poole, people forget, this is someone who was a first-round draft pick. 2019 was the 28th overall pick. This is not just someone who was picked up late second round, undrafted, and Alex Caruso, who's had to grind away through multiple two-way contracts, finally get a bigger payday. A Jimmy Butler, who had to grind and finally get a good payday. This is not this type of story. This is a first-round draft pick in the NBA, and to me, Jordan Poole is kind of the forgotten piece of the Warriors team that helped turn them around quickly over the last couple seasons. It's almost like when you're playing on the Monopoly board. Obviously, Jordan Poole is not Broadway. He's not Park Place. But he's almost like that Kentucky, Illinois, those red spots right on the corner after the jail, where typically you find yourself landing on that spot all the time, but you don't think about it because the rent isn't the highest. It's not the most glamorous spot to win in the game of Monopoly. That almost feels to me like Jordan Poole a little bit. This is a guy who's not the highest priority, not the number one priority, but he has shown what he's been capable of when given ample opportunities over the last couple years. And really, over the last, I would say, 8 months. When you look at Jordan Poole's progression, the last month of the season last year is when he really came on. He started averaging 18 points per game. The first 2.5 months of the year this year, before Klay Thompson returned, he averaged 18 points per game. In fact, in the entire month of November, which was 15 games played, he averaged 20 points per game. 16 in 7 games in December. He's had 5 games of 30-plus points this year alone, which when you look at the number of 30-point games amongst bench players, it's the most for any player that has come off the bench this year. So what does that tell me? Well, that is enough of a sample size to show me that this is a guy who can be an effective scorer when given the opportunity. And part of the reason why this is impressive to me and why I actually don't second guess this deal anymore is because when you think about who got hit the most when the Warriors tried to reintegrate Klay Thompson into the lineup, it directly impacted Jordan Poole the most because they play the same position. And I think that for an organization like the Warriors that has prided themselves on being extremely savvy, on being shrewd, on having foresight, obviously Joe Lacob thinks they are visionaries and they are the most innovative NBA franchise ever to be in existence in terms of their farsightedness. I think that in a lot of ways, this is an insurance plan on Klay Thompson. Because after all, Klay Thompson has sustained 2 season-ending injuries, not only an ACL tear and a ruptured Achilles. That's 2 years that it's stripped of Klay Thompson. And as good as he has looked, given the fact he hasn't played in 2 years over the last couple months, the guy's still averaging 17 points. He has popped off a couple games. He's still working his way back into consistent shape. As much as we beloved, or the organization loves Klay Thompson, and we love Klay Thompson as fans, those are major injuries, and you just never know how sturdy a player is going to be. And so I think from one perspective, this is the organization wanting to provide themselves a safety net to have a backup plan, an insurance plan. The other thing is it alleviates a lot of the scoring pressure off of Steph Curry moving forward at the guard position. Look at the guard position on the Warriors, and really outside of Steph Curry and Jordan Poole, because again, Klay Thompson is working his way back. The only other guards they have on their roster is Gary Payton II and Chris Chiozza, who I guess don't necessarily turn the ball over in Chris Chiozza's case, but they're not exactly dynamic basketball players. Jordan Poole can be a dynamic basketball player. He has shown he's a dynamic basketball player. So part of it is retaining the depth that they want at the guard position to, again, help allay some of the offensive burdens that's been so cumbersome on Steph Curry over the last couple of years. That's part of the reason. And we know, given how we've seen other teams throw boatloads of money to scorers on bad teams, that a bad team would throw a boatload of money to Jordan Poole and kind of lure him away from the Warriors. We've seen that happen all the time. And I think that as much as we want to shake our heads at how in the world is Jordan Poole going to command $20 million a year when you see a guy in Steph Curry who's making $10 million a year. And to me, I think Jordan Poole is a more dynamic offensive scorer than Steph Curry. He's also a little bit bigger. He's also a better defender than Steph Curry is. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he could make $20 million a year in that 4-year deal. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. The other thing is, and this is the last point I want to make about Jordan Poole, to his credit, he's a different scorer than most of the scorers we have in the NBA. And the reason why I say that is not just because of the fact that he plays on the Warriors, but because of how the Warriors culture has rubbed off on him. This is a guy in Jordan Poole who is an extremely efficient scorer. He moves without the basketball. He's unselfish. He plays complementary basketball. He has shown a large enough sample size where he's not a ball dominant guard. So wherever he goes, whether he's with the organization in Golden State, whether he's somewhere else, this is someone who's going to play winning basketball, who's going to play complementary style basketball. And I think when we look at this Warriors team, one of the reasons why Klay Thompson and Steph Curry have worked so well together is because of that understanding, that mutual agreement that, hey, this is Steph's team. Klay Thompson may get up just as many shots, but he's not going to be taking that many dribbles. Steph at times is going to be willing to give the ball up, set screens, move without the basketball. Jordan Poole was doing all of those things. He was mirroring and playing an identical style alongside Steph, and that's why he's been so successful. And I think when you look at Jordan Poole, I think a reasonable comparison is Spencer Dinwiddie, who I like, but unfortunately has gotten a bad rap as not being the most unselfish teammate. And he kind of has this stigma around him that he is just trying to get buckets. He's not necessarily the biggest team player. And I don't think Jordan Poole is like a Spencer Dinwiddie. In fact, the guy who I think he reminds me of, and I know this is going to be blasphemy, I know this might sound like heresy to some, to me, Jordan Poole reminds me of a younger version of James Harden with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Remember in 2012, Sam Presti, the general manager of the Oklahoma City Thunder, who LeBron James just lauded a couple days ago, didn't want to offer James Harden perhaps an additional $6 million total in his contract to retain him with the Thunder the year after they made the NBA Finals and lost to the Heat. And that's when Daryl Morey swooped in and made what ended up being one of the biggest blockbuster trades in NBA history, taking James Harden from Oklahoma City and bringing him to Houston and allowing him to flourish. I'm not saying that Jordan Poole is going to shake out into a James Harden 2.0. I'm not saying that. But I do think that because of the mental makeup of Jordan Poole, if you give him an opportunity to be the man or to be an elite number 2 scorer on another franchise, he might be able to flourish even more and prove to be very, very effective in another location. That was the situation. That reminds me, right now you had James Harden as the 6th man of the year that year. He was providing elite bench play. I think Jordan Poole can do the same thing. He's been averaging 16 points per game coming off the bench this year. And if the Warriors make a deep playoff run, he will be a critical piece. And that was an Oklahoma City team back then that had KD, that had Russ, that had Serge Ibaka, that had a young Steven Adams. Actually, Nick Collison really before that. So I'm just saying, I know you want to rule it out. Think about the comparison. Jordan Poole and James Harden back in 2012. It's not as far-fetched as it seems. Not to mention, right now, you look at their current tax situation. They are currently $24 million over the tax, which is extremely high. The 2022 NBA luxury tax threshold is going to be $147 million. Right now, they are at $171 million, and that is before they would sign Poole for an additional $20 million. So how they financially make that work and circumvent those loopholes, I don't really know. That's above my pay grade, but I don't think it's that far-fetched. I would pay him. It would retain him. You would prevent him from signing somewhere else. Alleviate Steph Curry. And it's an insurance plan. I think it'd be a worthwhile one as well.